If you want to rise above life's inevitable obstacles and move onward, this show is for you. We all need encouragement in dealing with adversity. Each week, my guests and I engage in authentic conversations about moving onward when confronted with challenges. We are vulnerable and honest as we share insights from our journey, as well as practical tips, inspiration, and resources you can apply to your specific situation, enabling you to move onward. I'm Emily Harman. Thank you for joining me today. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Onward. To tell you the truth, I've been procrastinating about putting this episode together for quite some time now. I have several podcast interviews recorded, but when it comes to just sitting in front of the microphone and talking about myself and introducing this podcast, I just tend to procrastinate because it makes me a little nervous, to be honest. The purpose of this episode is to just share a little bit about how I came up with the idea to put a podcast together. And because I was having such a hard time talking in front of the microphone, I asked my son, William, he's 25, to interview me. So most of this podcast is a discussion between me and William. And I think that goes a little easier and it helps me open up and get you to know me a little bit better. So in this episode, we discuss my recent retirement from federal service, why I started the podcast, how I selected the topic for the show. I also talk about several resources that I used in helping me come up with the idea to do a podcast. I've listened to Kathy Heller's Don't Keep Your Day Job podcast. It's an awesome podcast, and I talk about that in my interview with William. I also talk about the fact that I took a class called Make It Work Online with Jenny Shee, and that was a 16-week course. And it was an awesome course, really helped me with setting up my website and thinking through what other things I might want to do when I retire. I also took an online podcasting course by Pat Flynn. If you haven't heard of Pat Flynn, he's just awesome. He hosts several podcasts. The two that I really like are Smart Passive Income Podcast and Ask Pat. In the Ask Pat podcast, people that are interested in starting their own business or trying to grow their business are able to get a coaching session with Pat on that podcast about helping them with ideas of how they could improve their business, things that they could do differently. So that's a very helpful podcast. I'd also like to give a shout out to Podcast Press. And I'll put all these resources in my show notes, but Podcast Press edits my podcast. And I don't know about you, but I think that they do an awesome job. So now let's go ahead and cut over to the discussion that I had with my son, Will, on Easter Sunday afternoon. I hope you enjoy it. Who am I? Do you know who I am?
I know who you are to me.
Who am I to you?
How would you define yourself? Like if you could describe, yourself through the eyes of everybody else, but kind of like collectively. Like how you feel, like where do you feel how you sit in the world and kind of in your head.
Okay. So I'm 56. I'm 55 now as we record this. When it comes on the podcast, actually on June 3rd, I'll be 56. And I'm going to be retiring from the federal government on May 31st after 38 years of service. And those 38 years are 4 years at the Naval Academy as a midshipman, and then 7 years on active duty, 13 years as a reservist, and several years as a federal employee. But that's not who I am. I'm not my work. Although from people looking on the outside in, they might think that I'm like a workaholic and I'm addicted to my work. But I think that's because I just get passionate about things. And when I get passionate about them, I really put my all into it. And that's what I've done with my career. I've really put my all into it. But I feel like I also put my all into raising you and Anna, my two children, and to being a good mother. And I don't always probably let people know everything about who I am. I'm probably a little bit hard to get to know at first, but I do have quite a few close friends. And I would say that I'm still figuring out myself who I am. I don't know if anyone ever knows exactly who they are.
I don't think you ever stop finding that out about yourself either.
No, I don't think you do. And I'm still learning about myself. And when I retire, I decided to start this podcast when I retire. And I guess the way that kind of came about is back in 2014, my girlfriend, Barb Bausch, a good friend of mine, said, "Hey, Emily, you want to go to the World Domination Summit?" I had no idea what that was, but she told me that it was in Portland, Oregon. And do you remember we watched that show, Portlandia?
Yeah.
And I really liked that show.
I thought it was terrible.
And I thought Portland's weird, and I kind of want to go see Portland. So sure, I'll go to the World Domination Summit. I didn't really know too much about it. And now I've been 3 times. I'm going again this June. That'll be my 4th, and I've already got tickets for 2020, so that'll be my 5th time. And I took you to it once, 2 years ago. Yeah. So how would you describe the World Domination Summit?
It was interesting. I'm definitely an introverted person, but they're pretty accommodating for introverts as well. But it was very kind of in your face, just like you would expect in Portland. But it was definitely a very friendly atmosphere. They always had something going on, so that was cool. And I had a couple conversations with a couple different people.
But what was the purpose of the conference to you?
The purpose of the conference, from what I interpret from it, and what I took away was that it was like a big push for people who had ideas and wanted to, maybe change the world in a certain way, or change their lives, or just change something. And the summit was just like a giant confidence booster, and gave people a lot of tools and reinforcement, and just to kind of pursue those things. Like, don't just kind of wish on it. And they had keynote speakers who would speak on where they were before and after they decided to make a leap and do something that they wanted to do. And I think that going to that conference really kind of inspired you, and I know it inspired me. I just don't know exactly where I'm going to go yet with everything, but I definitely took a lot away from it.
Right. I don't think anyone all the time knows exactly what they want to do, but just like action.
Just a general idea.
Yeah, action leads to clarity. And when I went in 2014, I had no idea I'd be retiring in 2019, and I just had been pretty much from the age of 18 until then, exposed to the military. And going to that event, it was really about how to lead a non-traditional life in kind of a conforming traditional world. And my life has been one of kind of conformance. Being in the military, you conform a lot. And I saw people that were creatives, which I never really included myself in the category of someone who was creative, but I've changed that opinion about myself. But I saw creatives, people that were couch surfers, people that were bloggers, and people that wanted to contribute to society. And actually, the year that I went with you, right after that event, I had to go to a Department of Defense event. And at that event, I was a keynote speaker. And what I spoke about was, and it was contractors that support the Department of Defense. And what I spoke about was at the World Domination Summit, there's a lot of people that are really looking for meaning in their lives. And they don't find meaning in their day-to-day work. And they have dreams of what they want to do, but sometimes people get stuck, or they're not really sure how to implement it. And that summit gives motivation to do that. But my message to the audience at that time was, I feel very fortunate, and so should the audience of government employees and contractors that support the government, that we do have meaningful jobs. We're supporting the defense of our country. And I feel very fortunate that I feel like I've found a lot of meaning and purpose in my job when I worked for the Department of Defense.
We help a lot of people.
I like helping people, and that's what I did. I was the director of small business for one of the Navy's buying commands, and then as well as for the Navy. So just helping small businesses figure out how to do business in that bureaucracy was fun.
You weren't just always an employee. You were always trying to take someone under your wing and give them guidance and direction. And you're very good at that. That's one of the things that, like, I attribute most of my, success as an adult to just what I gathered from watching you growing up. You gave me a lot of advice, and I, whether I took it or not at the time, it's one thing, but, as an adult, like, I'm starting to do these things, and all goes back to the things that you've taught me, and I definitely attribute a lot of my success to that, because I look at people who didn't have that background. They don't know how to do a lot of the stuff that, to me, just kind of seems either normal or obvious. But I guess when you're don't grow up with a good role model like that of how to be a responsible, respectable adult, you don't get those character traits that kind of just got ingrained in me.
Thank you, Will. You'll know what that feels like when you have an adult kid an adult child that
finally starts to listen
and comes back and tells you that they appreciate you.
Yeah.
Because
like about time.
Yeah. But no, I appreciate that. And I guess, so by doing this podcast, what I'm really hoping to do is help people.
So what made you think of the name?
Well, about a year and a half ago, I think it was over Christmas break holiday, and I was with my sister down in Stanton, Virginia, visiting my parents. And, something I said about, I'm not too proud of the fact that I've been divorced 3 times. Not very proud of that at all. And she said, well, at least you're a sophisticated divorcee.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, I don't know if I am or not. I looked up the word sophisticated. I can't remember what it said right now, but it was something like full of knowledge. And I guess, I do have a lot of knowledge about divorce and some hard times, and, I'm not perfect. And
well, it takes 2 to tango.
It does. But I feel like, especially as a senior person in the federal government, as a senior executive, I feel like people look up at you and think, oh, she's got everything. She's perfect. She's tall. She's somewhat attractive. She's thin. But I'm not perfect. And I'm not afraid to share that I'm not perfect. And I'm not afraid to share that I've messed up and that I've been through some tough times. So anyway, I started blogging as a sophisticated divorcee. And then I don't know what it was that got me wanting to podcast. I think it was in about last year. It was in 2018. I went to the World Domination Summit, and a woman named Kathy Heller spoke, and she's got a podcast called Don't Keep Your Day Job. And she spoke at that event, and I really liked her message. Then I never really got in the habit of listening to podcasts. You know me, I hardly ever listen to music.
Right.
I just never grew up listening to music.
I really remember you ever listening to music unless it was like on the radio in the car. And
Yeah.
most of the times I turned it on.
Yeah. And then I didn't like what you were playing.
Yeah. You still don't.
So Kathy Heller had this podcast. So then I was working at the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., which was about 2 blocks from my apartment. So I never really had time on my 2-block commute to listen to a podcast. But then my office moved to the Pentagon, so then I had to take the metro to work. And so in the fall, I started listening to podcasts, and I just thought, I'll listen to the Kathy Heller podcast again, or listen to it, because I remember her from World Domination Summit. And her podcast, Don't Keep Your Day Job, is just awesome. It's encouraging people to follow their passion and to do something that they really want to do. Everyone has something to contribute. So as I was thinking about turning my Sophisticated Divorcee blog into maybe something more, I didn't want it to be all about divorce. When I look at websites on divorce, it seems like a lot of them are all just negative and thinking about it as something negative and attacking the other person or something. I just didn't want it to be that way. I wanted it to be something about how you move forward or move onward after that. So then I looked up, the word onward didn't come to me right away. I looked up a lot of different words in the thesaurus. And at first it was going to be like onward with grit and grace, or onward with grace and grit. And I used some friends that I took advantage of some groups that I'm in, and also social media, and I put out different titles. I think I ran some by you, ran it by my brother. So I've always been, I think, good at getting advice from people and reaching out for help. And so then we just thought, well, why not onward? Why does it need to be more than one word? And then I just added that subtitle, Authentic Conversations About Overcoming Adversity. So it's not just about divorce, but it's about any kind of adversity, and we all face adversity. And one of the things that I wanted to have it be, too, is just like everyday people like me, like you, not necessarily famous people that maybe the majority of us can't relate to, but just like everyday people. And I've had so many people come to me and want to be on the podcast and haven't even published it yet.
Well, I think it's important for people to see that hard times and struggle is not something to be necessarily like ashamed of or feel like you have to hide or feel guilty about it. Like, people go through hard times a lot, and especially in the world today, it's not expressed very much. People don't like to really put their business out there and say that, oh yeah, I'm going through a hard time, especially with like things like Instagram and Facebook. People like to show the best of times, and when you're going through a hard time, it's you feel a lot of times like no one can relate. So I definitely like what you want to do with your podcast, because I think it's important for people to know that they're not alone, and for someone to maybe hear something that they can relate to and gather some tips and, suggestions, and just that, that knowledge and having that in the back of your head that, like, you're not alone, means so much when you're going through a hard time.
I want it to be inspirational.
Yeah.
Not depressing.
Right.
Because I remember, I guess this is a kind of a big vision, and I don't know if it would happen, but, sometimes things don't happen unless you put it out there. Like, for the past several months, I've been telling everybody, my podcast is going to be published on 3 June. And guess what? That means I better get it published on 3 June, and I will.
Right.
So I'll put this out there. What I really appreciate about Kathy Heller's podcast is that she created these listening groups. It's groups of people. She's encouraging these. It's groups of people all across the world, actually, that listen to her podcast and have similar interests about doing something that they love for a living. And they get together and meet. And so I'm in a podcast listening group for the DC, Maryland, Baltimore area, or Virginia area. And we meet once a week. Every Sunday night at 8, we get on a Zoom call. And Dan Johnson from the group is the guy that wrote the music that I use at the beginning of my podcast. And Lisa Metzger from the group is the person that took my photograph for the podcast cover. She's a photographer. Dan's a musician. Maylise does her own podcast called Bounce Back Yoga. And I'm going to have her on my podcast where we talk about, it's called the Bounce Back Podcast. I want to have her on my podcast where we talk about how you could use yoga maybe to bounce back from a challenge. Right. And then Betsy Heaney is in my group, and she does a podcast as well. So anyway, we all have similar interests, and we all talk about what we want to get accomplished in the following week, and we hold each other accountable, and we're there during the week where we chat on WhatsApp about some challenges that we faced. When we feel down, someone encourages them. So I found so much support from that podcast listening group that I was thinking, what if we had listening groups of people that listen to this podcast where they can reach out for help in a challenge that they're going through? I remember being a single parent, raising you and Anna, and in an area where I didn't have family around, so not having a lot of support. Like, I needed someone to help with taking you to soccer practice on a day I couldn't make it, or something like that. Or, there was just hard times, but I wish I had reached out more, but I didn't even know of any groups where I could reach out.
Right.
And so maybe that's where this could lead to, where people are more forthcoming about the challenges that they're facing and not ashamed or afraid to reach out for help.
So when you think about the word onward, what parts of your life does that make you think about, if I say the word onward, in relation to, what your podcast is about? What are some kind of general topics, without going into too much detail, because I'm sure you'll get into that with some of your guests?
Well, for me, things that I've moved onward from are, when I was a freshman at the Naval Academy, I tore my anterior cruciate ligament in my knee, and I was in a full-length cast from my toe to my hip for like 7 weeks. And that was really hard. It's hard enough to be a freshman at the Naval Academy or a plebe. And going through that was challenging. Just making it through the Naval Academy in the 6th class of women was challenging. Raising kids as a single parent was challenging in some ways. And issues with children. Everybody has issues with children as they're growing up, especially when they get to be their teens. And maybe that's something we talk about in another podcast. But, it's hard raising kids. My divorces, those have been hard too. I see so many things that we can talk about on this show.
So that leads into another question. Who can be a guest?
Well, anybody that can be a guest. And so far, I'm just kind of reaching out to the people that I already know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people are like, oh, I know somebody that would be really good for your show. But the people that I've interviewed so far are people that I know. So some of the topics are going to cover being transgender in the military. Another topic is depression. Another topic is having an injury that maybe impacts your ability to walk or your ability to do what you used to do, and how do you move forward with that. Another topic is going to be drugs and alcohol. I know some of friends that I have lost their children to an overdose. So how are they turning their pain into purpose? How are they moving forward after that? Because that's just a terrible, terrible tragedy. And But the women that I know that have suffered from this are just so inspirational, and they're using their pain, putting their pain towards good use to try to make the world a better place. So those are just some of the topics. The logo on the podcast with that E, that's over top of the word onward, that E, in my mind, symbolizes a lot of things. And I worked with somebody on Fiverr, Fiverr, that website where you can get someone to design your logo. But that logo, well, it's my name, my first initial in my name, E. It's blue and gold because Navy blue and gold.
Of course.
Worked with the Navy the whole time. Now, your dad went to West Point, but you know which team to cheer for, right, William?
The winning team.
Okay. I'll have to work on you with that a little bit. But anyway, blue and gold for Navy blue and gold. Also, it ends with an arrow, which depicts moving onward. And the blue transitions into gold because kind of when you move onward, you could maybe go from being blue to gold. A friend of mine, Lee Griffo, came up with that. But then you came up with something with that E. Do you remember what it was? You said moving onward isn't always in a straight line.
Ah, that's right.
What did you say?
I guess the E could kind of be almost like a loop.
Right.
So sometimes life throws you for a loop and, you're moving onward and you're starting to transition. You're like, wow, things are really going great. And then life happens and sets you back a little bit. But if you continue to move forward,
right, eventually.
Keep going up.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes.
It'd be nice if there was only one little loop like there is in your logo in life. But
it's not always that way, is it?
No, it seems like every time. But that's okay. If everything was easy, it wouldn't be that much fun.
That's true.
Especially when things go really well.
Right. You appreciate them more when you've been through some tough times.
Yeah, absolutely. For people who may not know, you're quote-unquote graduating soon, which is your retirement from the government. What are your plans? What do you want to do outside of the podcast? We've talked a lot about the podcast. So.
Yeah. Well,
you're a busybody. And I know...
busybody meaning I'm in people's business? No. Meaning I always have to stay busy?
You always have to say busy. Did I use the wrong...
No, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, you like to always be working on something, and outside of the podcast, you're going to have a lot of time open to do things.
Yeah.
So...
what am I going to do?
Yeah, you're going to entertain yourself.
Well, I'm calling my retirement a graduation, and actually that happens on May 14th, and this will be published on June 3rd, so it's a few weeks after that. And then my last day at work is the 31st of May. And a lot of people who got the invitation, they're like, well, what do you mean graduation? Aren't you retiring? What are you graduating from? Well, I feel like I'm graduating from one career into another, and I'm not really sure where it's going to take me. But
big summer vacation.
Yeah, big long vacation. I mean, I think the most vacation I've had is like 10 days at a time, and so I'm really looking forward to having that time off. But I'm calling it a graduation because a lot of people will also say to me, you don't seem old enough to retire. And so I think our society has a vision of what retirement means, or an idea of what retirement means, and it means sitting in front of the TV and not doing much. That's not what I plan on doing, so I look at it as I'm graduating. The main reason I want to retire is because I want to have more time with my parents, your grandparents. Since 1984, from 1984 until 2017, they ran Frederick House, which is a bed and breakfast in Stanton, Virginia. And they also had a jewelry store for part of that time. And they also had a restaurant. And you remember going down to Frederick House? Yeah. We'd have to check into the hotel.
I have vague memories of the jewelry store as well.
The jewelry store, yeah. We would check in, and my parents were always busy. They loved the work that they did. They loved the guests, but they were always having to cut up fruit, make breakfast, or check people in, or there was some
3 a.m.
Yeah, there was somebody that wanted to check in late, somebody that wanted to have breakfast early, and so we didn't really have a lot of time to just spend relaxing and talking. So when I retire, I'm going to be moving close to them where I'll be able to walk, like a 5-minute walk to their place, and also about a 5-minute walk to my brother's. So I'm looking forward to that. What I'm really trying to do is approach my life differently, because I really don't want to be all wrapped up and busy. I don't want to be busy. I'm tired of being busy. I've downsized. I want to be more of a minimalist, and I want to really enjoy my time and have conversations with people like this conversation. Right. Have conversations on my podcast. I want to get in better mental and physical health.
Okay.
Because even though I'm quote unquote skinny, I'm not in the best shape right now at all. And I want to get in better mental and physical health. I at one point was going to go to Georgetown University and become an executive coach, but I've decided even if I get accepted, which I don't know if I got accepted or not, I'm not going to do that because I just don't want to get back to where I'm just busy, going. I am right now taking a class called Make It Work Online with Jenny Shee, and it's a 16-week class. And just last week, I don't think I've told you about this, but we had a little session. It's for people who want to start an online business. And I am putting together a website because I'll probably do some consulting with small businesses and coaching of individuals. Right. I want to help people out, but I don't want to be so wrapped up in that. I want to be picky on what jobs I select because I don't want to, be working 40 or 80-hour work weeks or anything again. But anyway, in this class, we learned about there's a couple of things that we do when we're confronted with, I don't know if it was work or just challenges or something, but you can either get really busy or you can get paralyzed by fear. I don't think I get paralyzed. Like I've told you people I'm doing this podcast, I'm doing the podcast. I don't get paralyzed, but I get really busy.
Yes.
And my whole life I've been really busy.
You run straight to it.
I just go straight to it. And I don't stop. And I don't think, I want to be more thoughtful about what I do when I retire. And I want to really be selective about what I pick to do. I love doing this podcast.
Right.
And it's not a moneymaker or anything. It's just something that I really love doing. And I can do that and travel. And I can do that and control how many hours a week that I work. So I'm just going to start with that. And I'm going to take some time off. And then I'll kind of figure it out as I go.
Right.
But I don't want to just start out being busy right away.
Yeah. I don't think that would be good for you.
I need to slow down. That is going to be my challenge that maybe I'll share with on this show about how am I going from being somebody who, when confronted with things like I act like a tornado combined with an earthquake combined with whatever, I'm just like go and never really slow down. And I'm always trying to prove myself. I'm always trying to achieve. And I'm good enough just the way I am.
That's
I
right.
don't have to prove myself to anybody, but that's hard for me.
I think your career and what you've done there says enough. I mean, really.
Thanks, Will. Yeah. So it's a good thing and a bad thing to be just an overachiever, I think.
Yeah.
And I think I've done enough of my life being an overachiever.
Right. It's not going to be easy for you.
No, that'll be something I have to move onward from.
You're going to, move backwards.
So hold myself accountable on this podcast and maybe report from time to time how I'm doing with that.
Yeah. Maybe have a separate episode, like a couple minute little clip that you just throw up there every once in a while about where you are with that and where your mind is, where your head is through that process.
How hard it is for me.
Yeah, definitely document the struggle because it's going to be one for you.
And it might be one for other people too. And the other thing I think I can help people with is how to retire. I started planning to retire over a year ago, and it wasn't just the financial piece of it. I started that a long time ago, but it was more like, what are the certain things I want to finish between now and when I retire? What things do I want to get accomplished at work? I need to get my passport. I had a lot of different things that I wanted to kind of finish up. And so I have a little log and how I planned it. So
maybe people will be able to see your process with having to slow down, and they can reverse engineer it for some tips on procrastination, maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
So what is she having to not do? And that's what I need to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Get
that's a good
myself
point.
Moving.
Yeah, good
That's
point.
funny.
Well, I guess the point is that even in this Make It Work Online class, no matter what I do, I'm always learning. I'm learning from the Kathy Heller podcast listening group. I'm learning from different podcasts that I listen to, and that's something fun.
Once you stop learning, there's a problem.
Yeah, never stop learning.
6.5, 7 hours a day, I'm listening to podcasts.
And what are you learning?
Oh, all sorts of things.
What kind of podcast do you listen to?
Anything interesting. I like long format podcasts where it's real genuine conversation. I feel like that's something that's missed nowadays, and that's what I listen to the Joe Rogan podcast a lot, and he's got a lot of mainstream kind of guests on there, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Russell Brand, and he had one with Macaulay Culkin and people like that. But I like the other ones where he interviews scientists, because it's funny when they just blow his mind with science, and I'm always learning something. I listened to a 3-hour podcast on some coffee connoisseur who goes over to different countries and helps them learn how to grow their coffee to taste better, or just kind of help them fine-tune their process. And just the different things you learn in those podcasts. It's crazy. Like a 3-hour conversation about coffee.
Wow.
Like, no, you wouldn't really think there's like that much content in coffee. There is. Things about geography, timeline of the Earth, the Large Hadron Collider, and astrophysics, just across the board, all kinds of things.
You're so smart. When you sometimes try to tell me about some of the podcasts you're listening to, it goes over my head.
Yeah. It goes over my head a little bit too, but like I understand it when they're talking about it. I might not be able to spit it back verbatim, but I don't know. I like it because you can get really tunnel vision. Like you have strong tunnel vision in your day-to-day life. And you can kind of forget that right above your head at night, if there wasn't all the light pollution, is the Milky Way galaxy. I've seen the Milky Way galaxy with no light pollution. It's the most beautiful thing that I've probably ever seen in my life. And that's right above our head all the time, but we don't get to see it.
Where were you when you saw it?
Utah.
Okay.
In Escalante Desert. But it's just like things like that, and the intricacy of coffee and the process that goes into it. Like a lot of these things, not the Milky Way galaxy, but like a coffee and
we take for granted
astrophysics, and we take it for granted. We don't really understand the complexity of it, like just the craftsmanship that has gone into making this world what it is, and a lot of the innovation and the processes behind that, and the deep science, and then how just amazing it is, and it kind of gives me a little bit of a different perspective on the world. I feel like maybe some people probably don't have. It definitely sometimes doesn't seem like they have it, like the world revolves around them. But I used to feel that way. You did. Things have definitely changed. Gained some perspective as of lately.
I'm really proud of you, Will, and I look forward to interviewing you and your sister Anna. You're 2.5 years older than her. On
very different people.
Very different people on future episodes. I know Anna wants to be on this show too, and you both have overcome some challenges and moved onward. And hopefully, you'll learn from listening to some of the episodes that that we're going to play in the future, because
I'm sure I will.
I'm sure that there'll be other times where you have to move onward from something, and me too. And I think sharing your story also helps you get through it. I know sharing my story has helped me get through.
Definitely, especially when you vocalize it. There's a magic in vocalizing something that you can't get it any other way. I mean, you can get it from writing, but then when you're writing, you're rereading what you wrote. So writing is definitely a good tool. But if you, when you think, at least it seems to me that when I think inside my head, I'm thinking in English, but it's not concise. Like, if you ever tried to think something and then say it, you thought something maybe an hour ago, and oh, that's pretty cool, and then you try to explain it to someone, you sound like an idiot. Trying to piece that back together, and it's because your brain doesn't write sentences in your head. It conceptualizes it, does chunks of information, and that information sometimes is very hard to put into words. That's why not everyone's a poet. Not everyone writes books. Not everyone is a lyricist or renowned for those kinds of things. It's because it's hard. But talking about it helps you through it. Yes, absolutely, because helps you understand it better. It helps you understand it better, and it makes you have to really think about it. You're not just replaying instances in your head. You have to say it, and then in saying it, it might kind of trigger a different response, and you might think about it in a different way. There's definitely a magic in vocalizing. I attribute a lot of my overcoming of my adversity to having people who support me, who I can vocalize what I'm going through too. Whether or not they give me advice, there's, like I said, a magic in just talking about something. And just having somebody listen and not be judgmental. And I think that'll be good for your podcast. I feel like maybe if someone has something that they feel like they don't have anyone they can talk about, that too, and they want to talk about it, and they don't have that support, maybe they can get on your podcast and talk just openly with you about it, not like in a therapy session where you're really trying to get to the root of an issue, but just talk about it. And I think that would be beneficial to people too, if they wanted to, obviously. Thanks, Will. Thanks for spending Easter Sunday afternoon, chatting with me. No problem. I don't have anything else going on. All right. Except for you want to take a nap. Yeah, I do. I want to take a nap. Thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this first episode, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. You can reach me at Onward Podcast on Instagram as well as on Facebook. Just send me a DM and let me know what you think.
I'd be interested in hearing from you as to how long you think these interviews, these podcasts should go. In the interview with Will, you heard him say that he can listen to a podcast that's like 3 hours long. He likes listening to discussions. Some people try to keep their podcasts 1 hour. Some of my interviews have gone over an hour, and I'm going to have to decide if I'm going to cut anything out. I'm not so sure that I want to cut something out, so some of them might be a little longer than an hour. Some of them might be even an hour and a half. I find the topics interesting. I hope you do too. So I appreciate your time. I know that there's a limited amount of time in everyone's day, and thank you very much for listening to this podcast. Here's just some ideas of different times when you could listen to a podcast if you're struggling with how do you find time, perhaps on your drive to work. Sometimes I listen to podcasts when I'm cleaning my apartment, which isn't very often. When you're running or walking or at the gym. The nice thing about podcasts is that you can listen to them at any time, kind of at your convenience. If you subscribe to the podcast, then every time a new episode is uploaded, and in this case, I'm planning on uploading a new episode once a week, every Monday, then you'll get a notice that the new episode is uploaded and you can listen to it anytime during that week or binge listen to them, whatever you want to do. I just hope that you like the show. I really like the music that I have at the beginning of this show. And I mentioned when Will was interviewing me that Dan Johnson from Soul Pajamas is letting me use this music in my show. So as we close out episode 1, I'm going to play the entire song. It's called Quantum Leap. Let me know how you like it. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again on episode 2.
Subtle changes spanning generations, or a shift in the wind. A body dormant underground. His world is ripe and absolutely earthbound, till his wings come in. You are life in motion, an ever-changing sky, ending and beginning at the same time. You are transformation, always underway. The quantum leap from yesterday. Quantum leap. Children go beyond our dreams. Our little men and women fly away, it seems, all in the wink of an eye. We readjust at every stage, while young ones face the questions of their own age, both reckless and wise. You are life in motion, an ever-changing sky, ending and beginning at the same time. You are transformation, always underway. Quantum leap from yesterday. Quantum leap. If change is not the enemy, but only a disguise for opportunity, will you still fight it? And when good fortune comes your way, will you rejoice or mourn that she might leave one day?